Hi, I'm Christian, and we are here today to talk to you about balance. When we talk about balance, we not only mean our sense of physical self, but we means the balance that corresponds to our connection or our union with the balance of the planet Earth, the balance that is the solar system, and the balance that is the universe. So balance then is a sense of synchronicity that allows us to partake of the same energy that is the movement of all things. Unity in motion then is a definition of universal balance, because universal balance is the one body of life that moves as unity in motion. To further comprehend balance, I need to show you a graphic in order for us to understand the old symbol of where we're coming from in our understanding of balance. We all have grown up with this idea of balance as being something that corresponds to have a good postural alignment in which we align ourselves in relation to the field of gravity as if it were in a stack of blocks. And then out of that alignment, gravity centralizes us through the center of our physical self, and it becomes the force that allows us to experience equilibrium. This analogy is good, but it's only half good, in the sense that it bypasses the amount of energy that we need to be able to really actually align ourselves in this particular idea. Furthermore, this idea is static because we almost have to stop for an instant to sense where we are, when in reality, in our daily moving, we are never stopping. We are always in constant motion. So, in the analogy of balance, of unity and motion, we are expressing the energy that allows us to experience how the field of gravity centralizes us at the same time that it becomes the field of expansion. Once we begin to comprehend this energy field, which is actually the relationships of forces existing with our skeletal frame that allow us to be centralized in three-dimensional space, in which case then the actual, as I said earlier, the actual center of gravity becomes the same as the actual center of equilibrium, in which case then gravity and spatial or space becomes expansion. This is what we call three-dimensional balance, in which the physical sense of self in motion is suspended by the actual field of movement that is universal balance, and in which case we are centralized in 6 directions of space. That is, the right and the left, the front and the back, and the above and below are synchronized as one sense within our sense of self, in which case then the entire skeleton is suspended by the movement of life. To further comprehend this misunderstanding between this static sense of balance and the balance that is our natural life, I would like to show you these 3 graphics. In these 3 graphics, there is one at the center, which is our analogy of balance, in which there are 3 senses within ourselves: the pelvis and the legs, the shoulder, girdle, and arms, and the head centralized at the top of the spine, in which are expressing a field of energy in which, as I said, gravity and expansion are one, and there is no compression or sense of resistance within the physical self. Because we have misunderstood balance as postural alignment, and just we innocently misinterpreted the field of gravity as being compressional, when in reality it's always balanced by the other half, which is expansion. Some of us innocently have collapsed a little bit into our sense of physical self. What that means is that we are really coming into the spinal column and creating within our movement specific patterns that creates innocently resistance with our sense of physical movement. When this has happened, we call for now, just in terms of differentiation, a form of compression. At the other side, if we're thinking about this will be the center, and this will be one side of the spectrum, and this the other side of the spectrum. At this other side, the spinal column, instead of converging into itself, it's being used as a wall. So we create effort to lift it and extend it. And when that occurs, then certain areas within the places of movement within the spine becomes a vertex of motions that then creates a resistance between the different segments of the skeleton. So I would like to talk to you a little about what it means and how this comes into being. To clarify further about this sense of balance between compression and expansion, I would like to go back to this graphic a little bit. So I would like to show you that in our analogy of balance of 3 dimensions, there are 3 senses that they are suspending the skeleton in 3 dimensions within our sense of self. So the right and the left of your hips balance, interconnecting the legs in our movement within our sensation of the ground. The right and the left of the arms, centralized at the center of the chest. And then the right and the left in the head, centralized on top of the atlas, allowing us to experience the merging of equilibrium, which is actually the merging of gravity and expansion. In this particular formation of 3 dimensions, as we begin to understand and experience, then the spinal column is completely free in all its planes of 3-dimensional formation. So when we're returning with this particular understanding of compression and opposition, when we innocently feel ourselves that we have a bad posture, or we're thinking about my shoulders are converging, or I'm thinking about my neck is creating pain, or my lower back, I have complexities, or my hips, or my knees, on and on, what happens that certain areas within the spine and the formation of balance become vertexes for movement. And what I mean by that instead of being clearly directed through the 3-dimensionality of its natural extension, it becomes centralized at certain points within the spine. For example, in this particular graphic, the thoracic vertebra at the level of the 10th thoracic becomes like a point of conversion for the whole movement. Then the lower curvature of the lower back become over-accentuated, in which case produces an over-accentuation of the thoracic vertebra, in which then we feel sometimes that we are forward and we say in bad posture, or our breath is not very clear. And then when that occurs, then, and as the shoulders come forward, the neck, and certain areas of the neck, also becomes vertex of points of innocent resistance. So in the formation of the spine and the way we are relating and the whole movement of the spine determines how do we express the movement of the shoulders, the placement in which the hip and the legs are sensing the ground, the placement in which the head is centralized on top of the atlas. So when a person innocently is moving in this pattern of movement, it doesn't know that it's doing that. We don't know that we are creating resistance of compression. The only thing that we know is that certain places that we feel ourselves in discomfort. And as I said earlier, discomfort can be pressure in the lower back, then lack of breath, pressure within the shoulders, pressure or pain within the neck, sometimes headaches, because when compression occurs, gravity predominates. When it's balanced, the field of gravity is balanced by the field of expansion. So in the unity of both, that is when 3 dimensions come into being. When gravity predominates, the degree in which the system is relating to gravity is equal as the formation in which the person senses the body. Another form of saying, gravity is relative to the way we are experiencing our sense of balance. So when you begin to understand that, or we begin to understand that, then we begin to comprehend that in whatever way, or any sense of discomfort, or in any way that we are feeling that is not our optimal sense of self, can be improved as we begin to understand balance and begin to connect to the field of energy that allow us to be in 3 dimensions in our own motion. This sense then is when we are innocently converging upon ourselves. And we all have that, because sometimes we said, oh, I am in the computer and my neck hurts and my shoulders neck, or I'm in the table eating and somebody said, you have bad posture, you have to extend yourself up. And when we do that, most of the time, we go to the other side. We switch from this point and we go to the other sensation that allow us to sense like we are straight. Unfortunately, sometimes when we go to that, we go into the other side of the spine, and the points of conversions reverse themselves into other areas within the spinal column. This formation also is a very strong formation. Sometimes we feel like we have to become stronger and stronger, and sometimes when we do that, the places in the spinal column becomes like points of very, very hard, concentrated energy. And then what that does is that creates points in which rigidity within our sense of self. When that occurs, we feel like we are constantly needing to exercise, that we are not really actually experience the way that we would like to sense ourselves as being fluid and in a freedom of motion. The reason is because when we use the spine as a force to lift ourselves up, certain areas in this particular graphic, for example, at the thoracic area, becomes slided forward, and it becomes the point that supports the body. If the spine becomes very, very overextended, then the pelvic girdle becomes also goes into a different formation, in which the horizontality they become slanted, and then the shoulders, as they press back to assist the spine to go vertical, pushes the shoulders back, and again creates vertices up on the neck. And then this formation of the spine being overextended then creates pressure of this head and top of the atlas to lift the formation again, in which case all the amount of pressure gets concentrated at different areas. If it gets too concentrated, then lower back or chronic lower back pain begins to exist. Then areas within the spine and the shoulders begins to be in tension. Again, the head it becomes very concentrated, because the field of gravity and the field of expansion not being synchronized, not allow the head to be able, or the brain to be able to feel release and relax. So when you see in this graphic, for example, the gravity is solid and on either side, it means that gravity becomes the perfect mirror of the amount of pressure that the person is experiencing. And then the amount of pressure that we experience in the physical self, in the physical sense of self, becomes innocently the amount of pressure from which the brain interacts with itself. So therefore, our mental sense of balance, our emotional sense of balance, and our physical sense of balance becomes a unit that we call the sensation of ourselves. So again, as we understand three dimensions and unity and motion as the technology that allow us to understand and experience balance, then the mental sense of self becomes released, because the whole spine becomes extended three-dimensionally. And the release of the mind, of the release of the upper areas and of the spine, correspond to the relation of three-dimensional space. The release of the shoulder and arms, reflecting the release of the thoracic vertebra, correspond to the energy from which we are experiencing our sense of motion. And then the release of the hips and the legs correspond to the biomechanical sense of direction in which the whole skeleton experiences three dimensions. So it is important to understand, and we're going to go back again one more time to go more in detail to understand different possibilities of confusion or places in which we experience uneasiness within the physical body or stress, in order to provide a vision to how we can become free.